Now another feature that I'm going to show you in a second is an additional tool that I have purchased from a man named Q Lee. It's called a Lettuce 35 adapter. Now what the Lettuce 35 adapter does is it basically allows you to put SLR camera lenses, like still camera lenses, onto the front of the lens of your camera, and that gives you an extremely narrow depth of field. Now I'm going to show you on this video a few still photos that kind of demonstrate exactly what depth of field is. And you'll see that a lot of times in photos they have a certain subject that is in vivid focus, and all of the other parts of the image around that are out of focus, which really helps in communicating messages or a story, because it really directs the viewer's eye specifically to what you want them to look at. So you've probably seen in a lot of TV episodes where they'll have a focus on the person in the foreground, and then as another person steps into the frame, they'll immediately switch focus to the person behind them. And really that can be an effective tool for communicating. So that's what the Lettuce adapter does. And if you see these photographs, you can see perfect examples of a sharp focus on a specific area of the image, and everything else around the image is really blurred out. So here's a couple images that you can get in a sense of what a narrow depth of field does. If you have a wide depth of field, that means that everything's in focus. And that can be useful if you want people to see clearly everything that's in the frame. And most video cameras, since the CCD chips in the cameras are so tiny, they really can't produce a very narrow depth of field. So normally everything is going to be in focus when you're shooting with a video camera, unless you're really far zoomed in. The further you zoom in with the lens, the narrower the depth of field. But most cameras, you really can't get a very narrow depth of field, so everything looks in focus, and that's really one of the signs of video that distinguishes it from film. When you look at a film, such as a feature-length movie, you'll see the narrow depth of field being used quite frequently, and that's one of the signs that people can look for if they're trying to identify it as film. I'm going to show you here in a second the lenses and the narrow depth of field adapter that I have. Just going to pull it out here. Okay. This is the Lettuce 35 adapter, and how this works, I'll show you here. Just going to take off this lens hood. How this works is simply screws onto the front of the lens. This is a 72 millimeter thread. It screws right onto there, and the other end of this adapter is a Nikon film camera mount, lens mount. So that allows me to, for example, this here is a 105 millimeter lens. Made for Nikon cameras, and I can simply attach this onto the end of the adapter like that and put it onto the camera. I can switch any lens I want to on the camera, whether it's a wide 20 or 24 millimeter lens, or if I want to go super telephoto, I can use my 300 millimeter lens. So I can get really nice wide shots that I may not even be able to get with the camera itself, and I can also get a lot of nice close-up shots. How the adapter actually works, it's quite an interesting little tool, and it's quite amazing on how it actually works and how close it actually looks to film. What it is inside the adapter here, there is a little piece of glass. It's called a ground glass. And that piece of glass is given a frosted finish, so it's semi-transparent. The piece of glass inside this adapter is connected to a vibration motor, which vibrates at high frequencies. And so the light comes in through the SLR camera lens, hits that piece of glass, the image is projected onto that glass as if that was a piece of film, and then the video camera records zoomed in on that little piece of glass. And the reason it vibrates is so that any grain in the piece of glass is not visible in the final product. So since it's vibrating, if there's a little piece of grain or dust on the piece of glass, it'll be vibrating so quickly that you won't see any of that grain. So it'll look very crisp and very clear. The design of this particular model is such that since the images come in through the 35mm lens upside down, this has a mirror inside of it that flips the image upright so that when it gets to the camera, it records it upright. Otherwise, you'd be seeing everything upside down. I'll demonstrate this for you later on with some actual footage from this camera. I did another project that I would like to show you, but for copyright reasons, I'm not able to do that. But you'll see how precise you can get with the focusing with these lenses. Now, a lot of people have wondered, and I personally also wondered, that if the image is going through a piece of glass like this, and more glass here is hitting a piece of ground glass, going through a mirror, going through another macro lens, and into the camera's lens, you'd think that there'd be a lot of image degradation and loss in quality. So what that will affect is mostly your light. Normally with this type of a camera, you can get away with pretty decent lighting, but when you put a piece of glass like this and this in front of it, you're really not allowing the light to come in as easily since it has to pass through so many more layers of glass. So that's one consideration with these adapters, which is why it's important if you're buying an adapter like this to buy one that has a very wide, your SLR lenses, make sure you get ones that have a very wide aperture. Preferably nothing slower than f2. If you go to f2.5, f2.8, sometimes you can get away with it. But generally, if you can stay around f2 or less, you'll get the best results and you won't have to compensate with lighting as much. I have a 50mm f1.4 lens as my main lens, and that works fantastically. Just regular lighting tends to give you good results. If you use more telephoto lenses like 135mm or even a 300mm lens, you're going to lose more light, therefore you have to compensate with more lighting. As long as you prepare ahead of time for that, it's not a big issue at all. The other option is if you really are pressed for lighting and you're just really starting to run out, what you can do is increase the gain slightly on the camera. I should kind of quickly explain what the gain is for those who may not understand that. The gain is basically a digital feature of the camera that basically increases the light, the exposure of the entire image. Now the problem with it is since it's an electronic means of increasing the light, you tend to see a lot of noise or a grainy type surface to your images, especially in the dark areas of your image. So it's not a very good idea to use gain if it's avoidable. Gain is similar to like an ISO setting. If any of you are familiar with digital SLR photography, the gain is very similar to the ISO setting. Which is basically the type of film that you'd be using. Because, like, say this was a film camera, if you're using a faster film or a more sensitive film, you can shoot in darker conditions. If you're shooting in brighter conditions, you want a film that is not as sensitive so that the exposure is right. That's a similar way that the gain works on a video camera. This is quite an effective setup, and as you'll see from the clips ahead, the actual loss in image quality is negligible. In fact, I hardly noticed virtually any image quality loss as far as sharpness, color reproduction, as far as overall image. It was actually extremely crisp and clear, and that's something I was quite satisfied to find out. So I would definitely recommend this adapter. You can go to lettuce35.com or adapterplace.com, and you can purchase them there if you're interested in doing that. There are other ones available. Red Rock makes one called the M2. There's a PS and Technic one that makes other adapters. So there are other companies that are doing this, but QN tends to have very inexpensive products, and they tend to be well made, and they tend to work quite well as well.